Hello, Rowan here. I wanted to talk to you about a challenge that was brought to my attention by Rick McDonnell. It's called the 20 Books of Summer. It's run by Cathy at 746books.com. And the challenge basically entails reading and reviewing 20 books between the months of June, July, and August. So I have a TBR here that I've picked out of books that I will try and read in the next 3 months. Obviously, this is not set in stone. Things may change. I also recently have decided to undertake the task of reading every book by Kurt Vonnegut, which I will be doing during these 3 months, and I didn't include those books here. I think I should be able to read them as well. Read some of them as well. Also, when I was going to pick out books, I decided I wanted to try and be more intentional about reading books that aren't just by white dudes. There are certainly books by white dudes in this pile. No doubt. Got white dude representation. But I picked out a good amount of books that are by non-white dudes and by women. So let's go through it. First, a book that I should have read back when everybody else did, but I didn't. It's a Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. It's a chunky book. It's like 800 pages long. This is a book that follows 4 friends in New York over a fairly long course of time, I believe. It's notoriously very sad. And I don't know a ton about it besides that. It was a finalist for the NBA. It just sounds, overwhelmingly sad things are up my alley, right? So, next. Austerlitz by W.J. Sebald. This was the winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction. Sebald is a author I've always wanted to read books by, but I never have. He's known for including photographs in his books, which is kind of makes him stand out a bit. Someone marked this copy up that I've got. Marked it up pretty heavily, actually. There's a lot of writing in it. I don't remember when I got this or where I got it from, but obviously it was used. Up next, another one that really requires little introduction. The Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I bought this not long after it came out. This came out in 2019? Yeah. So I bought this like in 2020 from half price on one of their sale days. It's the sequel to Handmaid's Tale, which I have read. I read Handmaid's Tale when I was like 19, probably. That's the only Atwood I've read, so I am curious to read this. I've heard good things about it. It sounds interesting. I think it's interesting to write a sequel so long after the original. It's not as bad as Robert Coover and his Brunist Day of Wrath. That was like 45 years after The Origin of the Brunists, but still. Next, a reread. I talk about this book a lot, and talking about it so much has made me decide that I need to reread it. It's The Big Boy. The Instructions by Adam Levin. Yes, I am going to try, included in these 20 books, I'm going to try and get through this big boy. It's 1,000 pages, but it's a quick read. Again, this is a story of a Jewish boy who is kicked out of multiple schools for his violence and messianic tendencies because he thinks that he may be the Jewish Messiah. He goes to a public school where he's put into the Cage program, which is where the violent and unruly children are put, as well as children who are like special needs. And he sort of creates a gang, and then there is a violent revolution and a miracle. That's the way I always sort of describe it. I think that's kind of how it's described on the back as well. One of my favorite books but I haven't read it since I first read it when it came out 11 years ago. So I'm going to reread it. Next. Future Home of the Living God by Louise Erdrich. Louise Erdrich is one of the most well-known Minnesota writers. She has won the Pulitzer, I believe, and this is her second to most recent book. I've never read anything by her. Just hasn't happened. And this one is categorized as sort of a sort of speculative fiction. I kind of know her sister, Hyde, who teaches at Augsburg, where I went to college, in the graduate department. So I worked with her when I worked for the graduate department there. She's also the proprietor of a bookstore called Birch Bark Books, which is a great little bookstore. And she's the neighbor of my former in-laws. So, funny little... Her and one of my in-laws used to go to yoga class together. And apparently, she's a narc. She would complain that he would be talking too much during yoga. So, yeah. Next, we've got one that comes recommended from a friend of mine. It's The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. This is a science fiction story about a mission of 4 Jesuits who are going to make first contact with an alien species. It doesn't sound necessarily up my alley, but it came recommended to me highly from someone whose opinion I trust. So I picked it up, and I will be reading it. Next is another reread. Wolf and White Van by John Darnielle. John Darnielle is the leader, sole, permanent member of the Mountain Goats. We're a very popular and long-running independent rock group, singer-songwriter group. This is his debut novel. I read it when it came out. It centers around a man who, when he was in high school, attempted suicide with a gun and lived, but it left him extremely disfigured. And so because of that, he has sort of lived this inward life of solitude. He's created a number of different popular role-playing games that are played through the mail, but the most popular is one called Trace Italian. So you send your move in to him, and then he writes back to you and says what happens to you, and you correspond to play the game. My regard for it has grown over time since I read it. When I first read it, I was like, this is a solid 4-star book. But I keep thinking about it, and have kept thinking about it for years. And I just reached a point where I was like, I need to reread that, because I think I undervalued it the first time I read it. This one's all marked up, too. Whatever. Next. Pussy, King of the Pirates by Cathy Acker. Cathy Acker is a... I said maybe not well known, but in the world of like queer lit and like experimental lit is well known. Her most well known book is called Blood and Guts in High School. I've never read a book by her. This is the only one of hers that I own. It looks like it was one of her last books. Came out in 96. She passed away in 97. Loosely related to Robert Louis Stevenson's classic Treasure Island. Pussy, King of the Pirates is a girl, as in like Riot Girl with 3 R's, pirate story that journeys from the most famous whorehouse in Alexandria through an unidentified crumbling city that may or may not be sometime in the future, to Brighton Town, England, and finally to a ship headed toward the Pirate Island where the stories converge and the vision ends. There's a map in the back of it. That's fun. Yeah, like I said, I've never read any Cathy Acker before, but I've always wanted to, so let's make it happen. Next, Cows by Matthew Stokoe. I just had a video where I talked about getting loaned this book by my friend Saul. I don't know a ton about it, other than that it's extremely graphic and apparently awful and fucked up, and one of the grossest books ever made. Next, a book that I'm kind of ashamed I've never read. Kindred by Octavia Butler. I've always wanted to read Octavia Butler, and I just never have. I've had this book sitting on my bookshelf for forever, and just never got to it. And it's considered her best work, you know, and she's such an important figure in sort of breaking the standard of the white guy sci-fi, you know, being a woman of color writing in speculative fiction. Hugely influential on people like N.K. Jemisin, for instance, who I'm a fan of. So yeah, this is about a couple, a white woman, a black woman and a white man, who are transported back in time to the antebellum South. They're sort of, I believe they're sort of unstuck in time, a la Slaughterhouse-Five, and they keep getting transported back and forth between the current of the time that this was written in the late 70s and then the slave era South. Oh, funny, there's a quote on the back from Harlan Ellison, a person who's not known for his regard of either women or people of color. Next, another one Saul loaned me. Gun with Occasional Music by Jonathan Lethem. This is Lethem's first book. I've never read anything by him, but I've always wanted to. It is a sci-fi, speculative fiction noir mystery about a guy who's frozen and then wakes up in the future, and there are talking kangaroos, and it's a murder mystery. It sounds weird and up my alley, so. Alright, up next, we've got Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This was the debut book by Miss Machado. It's published by Grey Wolf. Very cool. I always am happy to read books put out by Grey Wolf, who are local to me here in Minneapolis. This is a story collection. Machado is maybe not better known, but also known for the memoir In the Dream House that came out a couple years ago that was about her experience in an abusive lesbian relationship. This is, like I said, a story collection. Yeah, I'm sure that there's a lot going on in it. It's supposed to be very good. It was a finalist for the National Book Award. Next, Possibility of an Island by Michel Houellebecq. I just read Houellebecq's most recent book, Serotonin, and enjoyed it greatly, so I picked this up as well. I don't know anything about it other than that it's supposed to be extremely dismal and nihilistic and hard to read because of how depressing it is. Sounds like something I'd like. Next, The Sluts by Dennis Cooper. This is a piece of experimental fiction that is about, so it says on the back, this puts it better than I could put it. Set largely on the pages of a website where gay male escorts are reviewed by their clients and told through the postings, emails, and conversations of several dozen unreliable narrators, The Sluts chronicles the evolution of one young escort's date with a satisfied client into a metafiction of pornography, lies, half-truth, and myth. Did want to try and read some, be intentional about reading some queer authors because it's June and coming up in Pride Month. So like this and Cathy Acker and Carmen Maria Machado. all fit that bill. Next, 300 Million by Blake Butler. This is a novel about a cult leader and the police officer who is attempting to investigate him and take him down. Blake Butler is a writer of experimental fiction. This will be the first novel of his I will have read. I've read one of his story collections, Scorch Atlas, which I enjoyed greatly. Looking forward to that. It's supposedly very weird, which I'm all about. Next, Fever Dream by Samanta Schweblin. Supposedly very weird, disturbing book. It was on Juan Plagued by Visions has a series of most disturbing books, and he had the third video in that series was all about Latin American women authors, and this was on that list. As you can see here, I've got it from the library, so I'll be reading it probably more immediately because I want to get it returned. It is about a woman who is dying in a hospital and a boy who is in the room with her, but he is not her child. And that's really all I know. It's just supposed to be weird and fucked up and dark, and I'm all about it. Next, Negative Space by B.R. Yeager. This was also I featured in a recent haul video. This is an author who kept on coming up when I was looking at books that I liked. I kept on seeing this book in the corner of Goodreads. So eventually I pulled the trigger and just got it. It is about a collection of friends who, in a small town plagued by an epidemic of suicide, try to deal with that by experimenting with a powerful hallucinogenic drug. It's got a quote from Blake Butler on the back of it, who I just mentioned. So I'm expecting something that's dark and gross and experimental. My kind of thing. Another one from the library. Suicide by Edouard Leve. This is a tiny little book. 128 pages long. This was his final book. It was delivered to his publishers just days before he committed suicide. So, as it says on the back, it is not just another novel. It is, in a sense, the author's own oblique public suicide note. A unique meditation on this most extreme of refusals. Presenting itself as an investigation into the suicide of a close friend, perhaps real, perhaps fictional, that occurred years earlier, Leve gives us little by little a striking portrait of a man with all his talents and flaws who chose to reject his life and all the people who loved him in favor of oblivion. Suicide and depression is something that I deal with and am interested in reading about. I find that reading about it helps me deal with my own depression and suicidal ideation. So this came recommended off of a review by Paper Bird, which is a fantastic channel. I'll link them below. So yeah. Next, Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff. This is a book that was very popular a couple years ago when it came out, which was 2015. I think it won the National Book Award. It didn't win, but it was a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award for Fiction, the National Book Award for Fiction, and the Kirkus Prize. So, well-loved book that I skipped when it came out. I've owned it for forever. I owned it for a long time, got rid of it, and then re-got it. And it's about a young couple who get married just out of college, and then 10 years later, their marriage is falling apart. Seems like familiar territory for me, which is why I want to read it. And finally, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, American Pastoral by Philip Roth. This is one of his more well-regarded books, and it's about a man in the late 60s. His daughter becomes embroiled in far-left terrorism. a la Weather Underground, etc. I have a great interest in the political violence of the left of the 1960s and 70s. Yeah, Philip Roth. I need to read more Philip Roth. He's considered one of the greatest of all time for a reason. And this is supposed to be one of his best books. So yeah, those are the 20 books that I'm going to try and read over the summer. I will make a video on each one about my thoughts on it. So be on the lookout for those. Be on the lookout for the Vonnegut videos. Be on the lookout for a lot of stuff. I have no plans on slowing down. So thanks for watching.